Hey, good morning, and welcome to the Comics Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club, the adult version. Yeah, the best version. We've got a really small book this month. It's a find of time travel science fiction. It was basically a unanimous vote of the staff, which is always the best kind of vote when everybody is on board. The book is Time Before Time, and we are really lucky to be joined with like the entire creative crew, which is DECLAN, SHALVEY, RORY McCONVILLE, and Joe Palmer. Hello, gentlemen. How are you all?
Good, Brian. How are you?
Was Joe muted? Okay, everybody's good now. Okay, very good. Hey, guys. Thanks for spending a Sunday with us to talk a little bit about comics. My first question, it's my favorite question of all about to do this, is why comics? You could be doing other things. You could be doing other kinds of art, many of which are probably easier. Why comics? What's it about comics that turns you on? One of you start, and then we'll roll around.
Who wants to go?
I'll go just because just raring to go. So why not? You know, why not comics? Sure, what else? I know I've had plenty of jobs in my life, and many of them. This is the adult version, right? So I can say shite.
Yeah, of course, you can swear.
Yeah, shite. I've had plenty of shite jobs in my time. I've always wanted to do comics ever since I was a kid. I was drawing them before I even knew what comics really were. And you know, at one stage I found out it was actually a job. So I was like, great. And ever since then, it's just been the one, arguably stupidly determined to do it. But I've never questioned it, and I don't think I'm capable of doing anything else.
Rory?
Yeah, I mean, I
don't know. Yeah,
for it, Rory.
Now that you've asked, I'm actually starting to question maybe I should be doing something else with my life. No, I guess it's probably that it's always a type of storytelling that I've been interested in. And when I was a kid, kind of similar to Deck, like I was very into comics, and then a similar kind of like, well, why not? It's something I enjoy. Why wouldn't I try? So yeah, that was trying to be the main.
Joe, what do you got to say?
Yeah, I grew up reading comics. It's something that I always didn't really know what it was going to feel like, and it's a dream job. I get to sit in a room all day and draw. Yeah, I couldn't ask for it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay, so let's try to break this down a little more. So what's the first comic that you remember reading that like stuck with you? Not just that you know, like I know that we bought this off the stand or whatever, but like the first comic that you read that it touched you and you went, oh, comics. Let's do that in reverse order this time. Joe, you want to go first?
Oh, I grew up with so many comics in the house. I'm going to go with Tintin because I lived like it. I just know his books. They're amazing. Hershey was a problematic racial. He did some amazing.
Yeah, those Tintin is a really good comic. We're having a little bit of problem with Joe on the stream. Is there anything?
Is he using headphones that are Bluetooth?
Are you using Bluetooth headphones, Jordan asks?
Indeed, yeah.
So Jordan says take them off. They're interfering with the audio.
Okay.
Turn them off. Apparently, we'll do it the old-fashioned way, man. Okay. Rory, how about you? What was the first comic that stuck with you? That was the comic you went, oh, the medium.
I think it was there's these over in Ireland and the UK, they do these kind of compendium issues of like old Marvel comics because we were always a couple of years behind. And I remember, I think when I was about 7 or 8, I was going up to Dublin with my dad on the train for some reason, and he got me one of them. And I remember kind of getting it, and it was 3 different stories, but like, I think there was one Fantastic Four story, a Hulk and an Iron Man, and they were all like, you know, one was part 2, one was part 3, and the other was part 4. And there was this kind of, for me, the kind of serialized nature and kind of having to fill in the blanks both about what happened before and after those stories was quite exciting, and got me interested.
Cool. Deck, what do you think?
Kind of similar in between the two guys, whereas there was a lot of like newsagents comics where like if you're big into cartoons, there was generally a comic of that cartoon, like the Turtles or what have you. And I remember like those, and I used to read a lot of Asterix in the local library near my school. but I'd remember getting my hands on an American X-Men comic. It was X-Men issue 35. Liam Sharp drew it. It was a one-off. And I'd been a big fan of the cartoon, so this is just the first actually proper American X-Men comic I bought. And it was just so exotic. Like, you know, it was from America. It just felt like nothing else I'd seen. All the ads were American. It just felt like this amazing artifact, and it was mysterious, and there's this whole universe happening that I didn't really know much about. And I remember the next X-Men comic issue was part 2, the Phalanx Covenant, and none of the same characters were in it, and Sabretooth was in it, and there was no Wolverine. I just remember being so confused and having to go like, what's happening? I need to know. And the art was so exciting as well. It was Andy Kubert, that issue. So it was definitely the X-Men pulled me right in, and it was just that mix of kind of, you know, like lack of knowing what's happening at all. But like, you didn't have Wikipedia at the time. You couldn't just look it up. You had to kind of wait for the next month and like do a little investigative efforts on the comics. And it was just so exciting. It just hooked me right in.
Yeah. No, and you have to decipher it too. It's like some foreign text from another planet that you've got to like, how do I find my path through this, you know?
Yeah, there's all this talk of how everything should be more accessible to be, and I don't disagree necessarily, but I do think what's kind of been lost is that aspect of, you know, the impenetrable thing that you don't really understand, and you've got to kind of find your way in somehow. You don't just kind of like, you know, Google your way in there anymore. Or
Yeah. No, I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I really don't. So let's jump to the book. We'll go back to comics, that part of it, in a bit, but let's talk about the book a little bit. Where did the book come from? Walk us through the genesis.
Well, I'll jump in there. It was effectively, I was a big fan of Rory's work, and Rory was working in 2000 AD at the time, and still is. But I know it's hard for writers to break in. I've kind of, gone off on my rants about artist credit and all that, but I still acknowledge that like it's hard for writers to break in. And I thought he was a great writer, and I thought I was writing my own work at the time, and I was just a bit over kind of stretched, and I liked the idea of maybe doing something with Rory. I thought it'd be a nice way that we could do something together where I could make another creator-owned book, and it'd be something that would get his kind of name out there. And while we were working on that, Rory and Joe had done a book together that I helped pitch to Image, and that ended up happening first. So then afterwards, we just kind of, me and Rory, we reached out to Joe and asked if because he'd finished on the previous book, Write It in Blood, and with this great team, which was Joe and Chris O'Halloran on colors, and Hasman Otsmane Alau on letters, and it was just, they did great on that book. And I remember thinking like, well, I've worked in comics for years, and if a team's going really well, then that's gold. A lot of stuff just falls off the track. So if we knew they were a good team, maybe reach out and see if Joe and co would want to do it. And thankfully he did. And I think it stemmed a lot of, like, Rory had written a lot of sci-fi 2000 AD, and I had done a lot of crime, my creator-owned work. And I think both those genres kind of flowed into each other as we were having a back and forth about the initial concept. And then, once we brought Joe in, like, the world building just started to happen and grow and become the book that it became.
Rory, does that jibe with your recollection of things?
No, it's all live, all live. Like that's pretty close. Like I think it was the one thing I'd add, I suppose, is that when about what Dec was saying about the kind of the crime and sci-fi thing, that when we were initially talking about it, I'd come up with a slightly more, I suppose, hard sci-fi version that we were kind of having a bit of difficulty kind of finding common interest in, I would say. So I think kind of introducing the crime element, or kind of bringing it more to the forefront, was a way for us to kind of both get more interested in it.
Yeah. And that was probably my fault, because I think I probably just put you more as a sci-fi writer because of all the 2000 AD stuff, and I kept throwing out sci-fi references to Rory and be like, I haven't seen that, I don't know what you're talking about. But like,
it's the fact that I haven't seen Star Trek.
Oh, not seen
Star Trek.
But Joe, what we kept talking about was Fargo. Like, whenever we were just kind of mentioning the stuff they were into, like, it was a lot of crime stuff. So I think I had gotten it in my head that maybe Rory just wanted to do sci-fi, but then ultimately, Write It in Blood wasn't sci-fi at all. It was crime. But I think, once we brought Joe into, like, he did the crime book with Write It in Blood, but I mean, I could tell Joe had more in him than, like, just drawing stuff, drawing contemporary objects, like from all like his sketches and things that he does. He's got such a great kind of design eye. So, the sci-fi backdrop to the crime story, I think, is what kind of makes the drama interesting as reading it, and yet keeps it visually really distinctive, which to me is really important. Like if any book I'm working on, even if I'm writing it, I wanted to have a feel, and Joe just brought that in spades.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I mean, each eras, I suppose, would be the best way to describe it, are visually distinct, Joe, and I'm really impressed with the level of world building and how lived in the world feels with that. What kind of a challenge is that, Joe?
How's the mic situation? Is it better?
Yeah, we're much better. Yeah.
Okay, great.
There was a lag before, like you
Okay.
spoke, and it was like 2 seconds later we heard you. It was weird.
Okay.
Yeah.
No problem. Yeah, I mean, it's a massive challenge in one sense, because I mean, how often the time period changes in the book. It's just like, I think to a lot of artists it would put them off completely, right? And not only that, but like on the cusp, you're like coming up with something that doesn't exist, right? So, but it just so happens that's what I really like to do, sort of make shit up as I go along, really. So the book itself is kind of plays to that strength very much. But yeah, I mean, it was an awful lot of work. I mean, it still continues to be an awful lot of work to just keep coming up with ideas that are like, as original as I can. But yeah, I just try and look at as many different sources for world building as possible, really. A lot of real world sources, but it's all to do with the way that you combine stuff, really. So you take a piece here and a piece there from something and sort of mash it together, and it tends to work in terms of making something seem really unfamiliar and yet kind of familiar at the same time.
Yeah. Is it difficult to keep track of it from scene to scene, issue to issue, like what time frame you're in, and oh wait, no, this is what I did over there? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would say writing keeps it pretty grounded for me. Like if it was, Rory and Dec are always really good about, it's very clear in the script where we are. And it's usually not, at least at this point, there were a few open, city shots in the first issue. But beyond that point, it's always been sort of fairly specific locations, whether it's a warehouse or, an alleyway or something like that. So I am kind of confined to a space, and therefore I can really kind of like focus on that space rather than thinking about what the entire rest of the city that we're in looks like. Because that you could get really lost down that kind of rabbit hole of design, and there just isn't time to do that kind of world building. It's comics, right? You don't have very much time for that.
No, comics have insane deadlines. Go ahead, Declan. I'm sorry.
Just in my experience, I'm aware of like the need for, economy and necessity. And there's things where there's this kind of thing about the artist is, comics don't have a budget. The artist can draw whatever. Well, that's true, but it's also not true because time is a comic artist's budget. And there's some stuff that's clearly more labor intensive for Joe, but then we don't need to cut to a cityscape every single time we're going to a different, what we try to do is, you're opening on a face when you're going to a new time. That's the kind of a timestamp idea is kind of a way of like just putting us in the time without having to necessarily establish all whatever future tech of that specific time, because like that'll just put Joe in an early grave.
No, I mean, just to add to that point, keeps it really character focused as well, which is what's important, right? I mean, that is what people are really investing in. Otherwise, it just becomes a sort of, it's a concept art book, right? Where you're just sort of visiting locations. It's much better from a storytelling point of view to keep it really focused on the people that we're following, as far as I'm concerned.
But also the strength of Joe's work, I feel, is to kind of establish the book so fast, is that, Rory and I, there was a lot of back and forth in that first issue. And like we did like 30 pages so that we could kind of, not have to explain every single thing that's happening all the time, and kind of naturally the reader just kind of acclimates to the world. But like a huge part of that is also like the environments and the characters. And so much of that world building is Joe, I feel, because you can write it down, but it's the reader doesn't read the script. The reader is seeing the pages and reading the dialogue. And I just think the first issue clicked so well. You know, not easily. It took a lot of work, but there was a great kind of, I don't know, kind of. I think we kind of clicked nicely in that first issue, which I think helps bring a reader into something which could potentially be very hard to kind of follow. You know.
Yeah. No, I agree, and that so many of the scenes, particularly in the first issue, are very grounded in our own experience. Just that the first conversation is about Wi-Fi and how do I get the Wi-Fi, and oh, you don't get the Wi-Fi, it hasn't been invented, tells you everything you need to know about the story in a way that grounds it in a really great way. So hats off to you, Joe.
That was, well, that's full credit to Rory for that, and I think that's why I found Rory to be such a great writer. It's the kind of you know, he's not neither of us, but like, you know, you run into people who like feel that they need to narrate everything and they need to show off how good a writer they are by explaining things. But like, I think some of the strength of Rory's work is that character work and basically telling, you know, filling the world out in what characters are saying rather than telling us what's happening, you know.
Sure. Rory, I want to ask you kind of specific question, because seems like much of your early writing background is from like Future Shocks in 2000 AD, which are all short stories essentially, right? Like you've got 8 pages, I think, every time, or is it flexible?
Four actually.
Oh, 4. Good Lord.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so you've got to communicate a lot of information in that short amount of time. Do you think that makes you a better writer on long form comics because you recognize how important economy is?
Oh yeah, I think it's definitely like Future Shocks and most of the 2000 AD stuff would be, say, 6 pages at most an episode. So I think absolutely, yeah, that kind of short form storytelling it really teaches you not to have any fat on the writing, and just because you're building worlds and destroying them in 4 pages. So you really kind of get down to that just really primal, like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 storytelling, and just have to beat it into yourself over and over again. So yeah, I would absolutely recommend anyone writing comics to try them, even just as an experiment.
Declan, spent years working in Marvel Comics.
Just before, can I ask Rory something? I'm just curious, like, how has the experience of, because now we've written like 11 issues now at this stage, and you've done Write in Blood, like, how has the experience of like working more long form, you know, after years of that kind of more compacted stuff, like, because like, you know, we have splash pages in there where it's just one person saying a line, so you know, I wouldn't say that's fat, but that's something you can do in more long with a more of a page count.
Oh, for sure, yeah, and I wouldn't term that as fat either. Like it's more just, I suppose, when you are doing a Future Shock, you kind of just have to get like, don't have the luxury, I suppose, of like having those kind of beats. So it kind of working on longer form stuff now, I think you're kind of able to play with like slightly more instruments, to use a weird bad music analogy, but I think it's been great to have the space to kind of delve into character, because the one thing is with the short stuff is that you can get stuck just servicing the plot a lot, and obviously there's compression with relation to narration and stuff, which it's nice to be able to let scenes breathe, but I think it's only from doing the shorter stuff that you kind of learn what the best rhythm is for those, if that makes sense.
Sorry, Brian, I was taking over your
No, not at all. No, I think that's great, and I actually like that you asked that question, because my question was going to be to you, was that so much of your sort of historical work has been, you know, sort of Marvel Comics and things like that, where they're definitely 22 page long stories. You could probably agree, you've certainly worked on some comics that had a certain amount of filler in them.
How dare you?
No. I didn't mean it that way, you know, but it's just sort of the nature of how American comics are made and the schedule on which they're made, you know.
I mean, when I started at Marvel, it was 22 pages, and then within the year it switched to 20. And even that was a conversation when we were starting on this book, you know, because I'm a strong believer in a set page count, because that gets very complicated when you're trying to put a book together and figure out how many pages your trade going to be, blah 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 blah. But I think I was going for 20, Rory wanted 22, and we ended up going 22. We did 30 for issue 1, and then I was going to do for last month's one shot, I was going to do 22, but it was Joe who actually said, "Why don't you do 24?" I was like, "Son of a bitch!" But yeah, I mean, I've done some short stories and things, but I'm definitely more used to the kind of 20-ish page episodic element. But like but I've also done some graphic novels and I've written towards that medium as well, So when I have done graphic novels, it's not like page 20 and you end it and then page 1 of the next chapter is telling the story from the first issue all over again,
Sure.
Those kind of things that you need to do episodically to a degree, try right for the medium. And I think, I have a healthy sense of pacing, I think, from all my years and working at it. I think that helped us out originally. Maybe if I think I might have had some feedback for the guys Write It in Blood, or we were starting on this. I think I have a good instinct for knowing when to kind of move a scene or kind of move something forward, or we need a breather moment here, little things like that. I feel like that's more in my DNA, and without having to think about it too much, I think I have a good kind of instinctual feel for when to hit those moments.
Yeah. How do you guys work physically on scripts, since there's two of you writing it? Are you sort of having a phone call or just a email chat ahead of time? One of you takes a point on it, the second one does a pass, or what's the actual process?
I'll say, Rory.
Yeah, so we'd start, I think usually, say each arc, we'd have kind of an initial phone call or a Zoom call, and we just kind of talk through the main beats of the story. And then I'd go up and write a kind of a longer form outline. And we kind of go over that together along with our editor, Heather Antos. And once we kind of agreed on that, we'd start on to scripts for the first issue of that arc. I would typically kind of take the lead and then kind of divvy out a section of the script for Dec to do. And then he'd send them in, I'd stitch it all together and then pass it to him to do a pass on it. Then we'd pass it on to Heather. And that's generally how it would work.
Complicated.
Yeah. I talked to two different, because when we were planning this out, probably even before we talked to Joe, because I didn't know how you co-write anything. I hadn't done it before. I talked to two different teams, and one said that they both basically did it 50-50. And I'm like, okay, cool, that sounds fair to me. But they said, but that had ended up being a lot harder to do because you were kind of fighting against the other person. And I talked to another team who basically said that they talk, which is what we ended up doing, which is talking it out at first, somebody taking point and then somebody kind of coming in with notes, because I think with somebody taking point, it means it gets done rather than you spend half the time kind of, fighting for space, as it were, I mean, it worked for me because I'm doing so many things anyway. I was happy for basically Rory to do the donkey work. So it's grand with me, but yeah, I think it a little more kind of back and forth than you'd think. But I think that's probably Heather's input too, is she kind of forces us to kind of give it another fine, run with a fine tooth comb. But it's done the book good, to be fair. So no complaints.
Joe, when you get a script, what do you do? What's the first thing that you do?
Essentially, you just have a really thorough read through to begin with, and that's usually enough to get started on. And then what I'll do is I'll have the script up on my phone and just start doing the what I would call pre-thumbnails for breaking down the issue, which is to say very rough sketches of panels and camera choice, design, anything that I need to design, any notes and stuff like that, and then that will get taken into a sort of clean up stage on the computer, and I'll clean up all the layouts and make it readable for other people, because the stage before is just completely not useful for any other person to see.
Do you work fully digitally?
No, so I do. It's changed a lot over the period of doing the book, but essentially I do all my layout on the computer digitally, and then I print those out and ink them traditionally.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So the computer is a useful tool, but I'm not a big fan of digital inking. So I still want to maintain the traditional art part of it.
Yeah. So and there's a part of the actual rendering where you're where you're there with the ink, you know,
Absolutely. Yeah.
the feedback. Yeah.
Yeah,
for you,
I
Joe.
think
Good for you.
it's just, things can get too clean in digital, and like, and bringing ink back into it brings a bit of spontaneity back as well, which you know, I'm in danger of getting very precise and clean when I'm drawing when I'm doing pencils. So bringing a bit of like, yeah, accidents back in is no bad thing at all.
I think that works so well for your drawing though, because you're so, you know, design orientated and shape based that, like, you know, if you were going pure digital with that, that could very easily get very dead on the page. Whereas I think because you're inking by hand and you're kind of dealing with kind of, you know, textures and accidents, it grounds everything. It gives all these kind of shapes and forms which could be very sterile, gives them a lovely kind of tooth to them, you know.
Yeah, it's just personal preference. I don't want to spend my entire time on the computer. It's not where my heart is.
But if you're going to be drawing, you want to be enjoying. That's one thing. It's kind of the conflict with drawing comics. I think is speed is such a huge thing if you're drawing comics because it takes so much work. But like, do you want to be? It's kind of how it is for me. I could go digital and be faster, but I would enjoy the process less, and I don't want to be doing something I'm supposed to love and not enjoying it.
Yeah,
That makes any sense. What's the point? You know. So things like, you know, speed, which can be a necessity. Like I think yeah, it's important to remember why you're doing the thing that you're doing.
So Declan was talking about doing some stuff digitally and then going physical. Are you saying that you only work physical, or are you using some digital as well?
Myself?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. No, I'm all. I mean, I'm digital in that I draw my layouts small.
Yeah.
Like this makes sense for the book because at least I have drawn an issue of it. So yeah, I do my layouts like about this size, and I'll do the whole book similar to what Joe does. But I draw it in a sketchbook.
Okay.
Sometimes, you know, if I don't like a figure, I'll redraw it in the margins and I'll Photoshop that in. So there's a little bit of computer manipulation. It's essentially the same thing Joe does. I just like having sketchbooks with drawings in them.
Yeah.
Rather than files in the computer. So, and there's the tactile element of drawing something on the page where it gets wrong and you mess it up and you got to fix it, and enjoy that frustration. And then those are all scanned, and then I'll lightbox them. I turn off the lights in my room and I put a piece of paper on the computer screen and I trace it off. So it's all high tech operation here.
Like,
well, then you gotta print them out, don't you?
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, and I feel weird.
Yeah, it's a waste of paper. Yeah.
So like it's just, for me, it's just the same thing basically. And then I'll pencil there, and then I'll ink from that. But I kind of found that process after a while, because it's a way of keeping your drawing, like, it's never going to be purely spontaneous the way you just work on a page. But at least when I lightbox over my layouts, I feel there's like 70% of that kind of energy from the layouts. Maybe it's not 70%, maybe it's just 30%, but that 30% is better than 0%.
Turning all the lights and light boxing, is that how is that on your eyes, man?
That's fine. Like, I mean, I'm not doing it all day. I mean, it might be tougher for Joe because he's literally probably going over things a lot more detailed. My light boxing is basically just the overall shapes. I'm not
okay.
I'm not like going and doing a detailed stuff. That's away from the screen.
Interesting. I'm always fascinated by how people make comics. Oh, which we have process video. Do we want to show some of that? Yeah, Declan, it's your process video is the one that we're gonna.
Yeah, I just have to say, just because I was so issue 6 is the issue after the volume 1 that you have behind you. So it's a one-shot issue that I drew, and this is just a process of, it's like a time lapse of me coloring the cover. So you can see that's all the line art with the flats, and you can see little dancing ants. That's the area I've selected. So that's me going in and trying to basically render the skull there. Yeah, just kind of building that up with some values that's gonna be there. You can just see it's just poetry in motion. But yeah, I do work digitally when it comes to color. It's just like the most efficient way to do it. So all the covers for the books I draw and color in Photoshop like this. But otherwise, yeah, it's all paper for me. I like that. I like that kind of hands-on feel. I feel very strange talking over me.
No. It's the right thing to do.
But yeah, you can see I'm just basically just building up the form, and then I kind of went in, and you can see I'll start doing kind of painterly effects of the background. So there's a character in that issue that things go badly for, and this is kind of a tease of what happens to him. But yeah, no, just coloring is something I've gotten into in the last couple of years. I've really been enjoying it.
How much do you think of color when you're doing the underlying drawing? Like, how much are you pre-thinking that, if you see what I mean?
I used to never do it because, with Marvel Comics, you're just the penciler or inker or whatever, and then, you may not, it'll say. I started coloring my own work since, so I actually I started doing it a lot with the covers because, one, it was a nice trick. If you could color your layouts and hand it into editors, then they're more likely, I think, to go like, oh, okay, yeah, this is good. If you give them 3 black and white drawings, they're going to pick the third one, the one that you hate, they'll pick that one. But if you give them one that you've actually considered the color work on, it's basically kind of half done. I think editors, they like those more. So it started off as a trick, but it became a good way for me to think about color in the layout stage, the same way I was thinking about storytelling, the layout stage. So, now when I could color something and I might be going like, oh, this is going to be green or blue, because when you're staring at the page, similar to with the layouts, like a lot of the thinking is already done in the layout. So when you're drawing, that aspect is kind of taken care of. So I try to do that in the layout stage now, where the thinking and the storytelling and the color ideas are there when you can just change it easily and quickly because they're just layouts. So when I'm actually coloring the final pages, a lot of that kind of heavy thinking is actually done for me, and I can just kind of get down to actually, rendering and stuff. It's been a kind of a weird process to get to there, but I actually really enjoy it now.
Yeah, no, that's great. I have one more question for you about writing a script as an artist, and especially as a comics artist. Do you like do layouts when you write a script just to make sure that it's working, or is it completely in your head?
No, it's for me, it's in my head anyway. Like after all these years, I think I have a fairly good sense of what fits on a page. So, I kind of work from a rough 5-panel standard, whereas like I feel like that's like a normal pacing, and from there I'll go, well, is this a page that needs more or does it need less? Some pages need to be 3 panels, some pages are splash pages. So I kind of negotiate, but I feel I have a fairly good sense of pacing of what fits on a page or where to kind of add or subtract things. I'm kind of doing something at the moment that I'm writing and drawing an X-Men digital arc at the moment, and that's actually different. I'm doing the layouts first, weirdly, because it's a different format. It's the ones that for Marvel Unlimited that you read online. Yeah. So I have a less sense of what's going to fit on that because it's a very thin screen. So I basically wrote an outline and I did the layouts, and now I'm writing with the layouts. But if it's a script like Time for Time or like a script for another artist, I'm fine just writing script. I don't like. There's no point 2 artists doing layouts for a book,
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I meant more for you, like making sure that you solved the problem for that page. Do you know what I mean? Like, did this work? Oh yeah, I can make it. I can draw it out so it can work.
Yeah, no. I think I've got a good sense for that. I mean, Joe will have a better idea because he does read the script. I failed a few times because there's some scenes where, characters on the left are on the right and things like that, and I know I've messed up there. Like I should be catching that stuff, and instead of Joe getting to it. But I think Joe would have better if.
Yeah, I want to ask Rory first, and then we'll ask Joe so he can say if they're full of shit or not.
Full of shit, definitely full of shit.
As someone who's not a comic book artist, how do you navigate the process of pre-planning the page when you're not actually an artist yourself? Yeah.
I mean, I do incredibly crap thumbnails just to.
You do. So you do.
Yeah.
Actually, I love it. Yeah. The writer does and the artist doesn't. That's kind of fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. No, like it's not something I'd ever send to an artist for more than one reason, but it's more just figuring out. I suppose being sure that there is a way that it can be done, and also just from a storytelling point of view for myself, just to, see what, like, are there different ways to play beats and stuff. But that would be part of the process for me. Not always, but a lot of the time. Definitely, if I get to a problem, then I'd go back to layouts just to try and figure out that way.
Sure. And how much do you consider the page turn and the end of the panel when you're writing a script?
A bit. Like it's always nice if you can add an extra bit of bounce or a reveal or something, or kind of time it that way. But it's, when you're looking at the issue as a whole, then you kind of have to factor in with, like, you might have 6 or 7 opportunities for those page turns, and you kind of potentially, based on the amount of space you have available, have to weigh up which one is more valuable to you than the other. So there's a certain amount of negotiation when you get to the issue as a whole. But it's definitely, it's a fun tool at your disposal.
Yeah.
So
I think we've always made sure the splash pages are on a page turn. I kind of feel like I think maybe we messed up at we were working the first issue and we realized the page turn the splash page wasn't a page turn. We had to a little. Am I right about that?
I think that was the extra page, right? It was just
it's 31.
Right, 31 pages. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Because of that. Yeah, and then so you have to be aware of that when you're putting the trade together, so that little things like that. It's a head wrecker, but I always try and make sure that if it's a splash page, it's on a page turn. But I mean, that's just because you forget sometimes. You just get in the middle of it and you just kind of lose track of yourself. But I mean, but with a lot of this stuff, like, I think it's the head wrecking part of it, but it's also like the problem solving aspect of it is what's cool about comics. I don't know if Joe feels the same, but what I like working when I do work from somebody else's script, I really like, it's like solving a puzzle, and when you crack it and you like the storytelling's figured out. Sometimes the annoying thing is having to draw a fucking whole comic because you're like, I figured it out already. I've done it. It's here in my layouts. I have it done. Why do I need to actually draw it now? That can be a thing sometimes, I feel.
Well, so Joe, now that the two writers have talked about like how they approach it, how much do they get it right, and how full of shit are they?
They're not full of shit at all.
No.
It's I mean, I haven't had a huge amount of experience with other writers, so I can't really say.
Sure.
But from my limited experience, I mean, I find it pretty easy to write from their scripts, so that's great from my perspective. Everything's always really clear, and I'm always really aware of why they've made certain choices. So that's great. It makes my job much easier. And that puzzle solving that Dec was talking about is much easier as a result of it being really clear what's being asked of him. I mean, this is a very easygoing job. That's what I would say.
Well, except for the deadlines, maybe.
Except for the deadlines, except for, as Dec said, the drawing of the actual thing. I mean, that's the real labor intensive part. Yeah. Is that once you've solved all those problems, you are literally just it's just hours and hours of labor to execute the thing that you've already done, right? That's the job.
Also, the problem solving aspect like that is it's challenging and it's head wrecking, but it's very satisfying. But that's not quite the same as trying to kind of unfuck a mess. I think that's our job as the writers, to make sure what Rory's getting isn't just a complete mess that even the last layers you sent in, Joe, I think you pointed out like a page here where you added a panel or something else there, and I mean, and I never have notes to that because I know that's you making sure that the storytelling flows in the way that works for you, and that's that's even like seeing that sometimes. I like seeing what comes back, which wasn't necessarily in your head, is I imagine most writers would say is the coolest thing about writing.
Yeah, I mean, all of those decisions are usually, whenever I add anything, which is not that often, it's always to make it more visual, right? It's always to aid with the visual storytelling, rather than just having it, maybe be a jump from one moment to the next, which it's comics, right? A gutter can be any amount of time you want it to be. But just from that flow perspective, it sort of, bridges a gap sometimes. But I really don't have to do that very often. And it's usually only if I really feel like it would aid it, but yeah.
So what percentage of the time would you say, Joe, are you changing the timing of the page or the flow of the panels or things like that?
Because I mean, almost never, basically.
Yeah, okay.
No, I mean, I really do respect what the guys have written. I'm not one of those guys who is just like, I personally, from my point of view, I just think it's a little bit disrespectful to change something that much. because I'm not trying to turn it into my thing. I think it becomes a bit of an ego-driven like scenario in those terms. And yeah, I'm not trying to like throw my ego around on the book at all.
I was the same when I was working on books with other writers. It was I mean, you can tell some. I mean, I've had more experience than Joe, so you can tell some writers have a better visual sense than others. It's clear when you're. I mean, it might become more clear to Joe maybe what about that scripts don't consider that when if you get other scripts, but it's refreshing when you're reading a script and you're like, well, this is coming more naturally to me. There's always problem solving, but like something is just kind of like come more natural, and I've always found that it's tended to be when I'm working with writer artists, like Jeff Parker or Brian Wood. I remember those they flow quite neat. But then when I worked with Warren Ellis, strangely, somebody who isn't an artist, brilliantly visually flowing, So some people just have a great aptitude for it, and it makes life for the artist way easier because it's tough enough to do, trying to like bang your head against the wall, trying to make stuff work visually is tough. And I definitely wanted this to be a really visual book, and like Joe makes it that, and that's what I love about it. I love picking up the book, and like I don't think any other book looks like it on the stands, which is maybe a small thing, but for me is huge. I just especially doing creator-owned book, I just feel it needs to be its own thing, and I feel that with the we all gel quite nicely on a book, which has been like a delight.
Yeah, and only because you brought up the creator-owned book, it's doing well for you guys?
Sure. I mean,
yeah.
It's hard to say. Like, yeah, I think so. Like, we're making money on it, which is nice.
Yeah.
But
could always do better.
Could always do better. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not Saga, but it's doing well.
It's not Saga.
What is?
Few things are.
No, I mean, it's tough. I would say it could do better. Like, because I'm not trying to downplay it or anything. It's just, we didn't know if we'd have an issue 6 by the time we were drawing issue 5, I think.
Right.
Was that it? When, Joe, you were drawing issue 5, was it when issue 1 came out or when we announced?
I think it was when we announced.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think we had the whole thing almost wrapped.
Yeah. So we didn't even know what sales were by then, So then we were kind of sitting on our hands for a bit because, I can't ask Image, do we get more issues when they don't even have order numbers? But I think they said we could do a second arc. So that's why one of the reasons why I did issue 6 was because we were waiting to see what happened, and I didn't want to lose time. So we didn't want Joe to have to like turn an issue around in 3 weeks or whatever. So that was a way of structuring the book so that arcs can be collected in one storyline, and we can have these one shots to kind of give Joe a bit of breathing room. But yeah, I don't even think we didn't have orders by the time issue 1 came out, so we weren't sure how much we could afford to do the book.
Sure.
And we still aren't 100% sure, to be honest. We're doing okay. I don't know. For us, I think me and Rory talked about this recently. Is trying to figure out how long can we afford to pay for the book, and see into the future to where like we wouldn't be able to afford to do it anymore. But anything can change. Like the book could sell crazy out of nowhere in trade, and then all of a sudden we'd be far safer. The numbers on the issues could stabilize, which means we've more little things like that. So it's been very difficult to work out because there's also a big idea that can go to a lot of places. So we literally just we wrote the 5 issues and go like with knowing we want to go longer, but we're prepared that we might be cancelled, but we weren't. So, but now it's like how long is a piece of string at this stage? We're trying to kind of like map out stuff without lacking kind of financial information. But
sure.
So yeah, could do better because it would make things less stressful for us to figure it out. But yeah, the fact that we're making profit on the first few issues is great, and that meant everything was paid for, so no one's in debt or anything, and now getting royalties on issues and things like it's great. Like I'm really happy. I think we're safe.
The one thing I have heard from quite a few people that I've listened to is a lot of people dropped off on like the first 1 or 2 issues. They wanted for the trade, so I'm sort of optimistic that a lot of people will come back for the trade if they remember that the book exists, because I do think the time travel aspect, the location hopping and stuff, it did put some people off in terms of like holding on to the story. I personally think it's not a problem, but I can see how that would be a problem. Do you know what I mean? So I think possibly the trade would, we will see, but I think it could potentially sort of do quite well.
Yeah, I think
I mean, I
it comes
think
down to
the trick
to
with trades always is getting to that second trade, the third trade, and then they start sustaining each other. They start kind of building each other up once you've got that. Oh, 3 books. That's actually a serious thing.
It's so because that's like a year, that's 2 years work before you really know,
Right.
you know, what the, you know, whether you're standing on quicksand or
Yeah.
or
No,
concrete.
I believe me, I understand. From my side as a bookseller, believe me, I get it. How much do the variant covers influence the economic picture?
It's a good question. I mean, we did variant covers on injection, and I did them all, and that was kind of, I mean, maybe it was a little, you know, narcissistic or whatever, but for me, it was a design challenge. I wanted to do something very different as an illustrator, and the variants were a cool way to do that. The time before time, I mean, I personally love seeing other artists' take on books that I like. And I'm a fan of so many artists that it's cool to just kind of, you know, ask someone whose work you love to do their spin on this thing you've developed. I wouldn't say the variants for the first couple of issues. Maybe you're talking that they actually have some kind of like if they're incentive covers or whatnot. But where we are now with the covers is we just do a B cover with an artist we like. I wouldn't say it's necessarily changing the sales on it. I just think it's an exciting thing to do from an illustration point of view. And if I'm being honest, I think marketing, it's nice to, like, well, we have a Mateus Bergara cover for issue 9. No, wait, 8.
8.
Coming out next. And God, I fucking love it. It's so good. Like, it's amazing. And it's nice to have imagery that Joe or me doesn't need to generate every month. You know, it's another thing we can show that isn't like, well, it's a creator own stuff. You need to constantly bang the drum for some reason. You need to keep reminding people that this book exists and that you need to pick it up. So if a brand new image by Mateus Bergara, you know, helps, then I mean, it's probably, one could argue it's costing money because you don't know if you're getting the return on what you're spending. But I think for the prolonged enthusiasm and to show newness, especially with now the book's what, issue 7, and like it barely gets reviewed, and it's not nothing on the book, it's every book. This happens to every single book. Once the first arc is out, people forget about it. So for me, it's kind of it's a reason to keep a little bit more, inject some more newness and something to kind of talk about into a book that could become stale if you're not careful.
Fair enough. I have my own opinions as a comic book store. But I'm not.
Well, I mean,
What are those?
Yeah.
No, I think that the industry as a whole is doing way too many variant covers, that there's way too much of any of it. And so it's all generally become less special. Now, if it's making economic sense for you, you're making more money and you're bringing more eyes, well then sure, that I guess I understand. But I feel like a lot of it's, what's the right word? It's not performative because that's not what it is, but it's more like people are doing an expected move, and that the fear is, oh, well, if we don't do the variant cover, then we're going to lose 10% of the sales, right? And so we've got to keep doing it.
Yeah, no,
and you build yourself a weird trap as a creator. That's my fear.
No, I can see that. I mean, I would say that, and this, you know, to be fair to Joe, like this had nothing to do with him, so it's all on me. To be fair, it was my call. Like I said, I like the newness and everything. Like I would say they're probably paying for themselves, but it's not like we're making crazy money doing the B, because the B variant is orderable. It's not what's the word I use?
An incentive.
Incentive, yeah. It's not an incentive. We did the incentives for the first few issues because the numbers were clear, you know. And then I think we did them for issue 1 and 2, and then we didn't for issue 3, and the numbers went. And then we did them for issue 4 and went back up, and it sucks because like
back up. Okay, that's fascinating actually. So
yeah,
it did,
but then back down, but then down again. You know, like it's. I wouldn't say sales for 4 weren't better than 2, but they were better. They fought back up basically. You know.
Crazy thing is that ultimately the thing that we're missing in comics is we don't have a way to properly track sell-through to see if the comic itself sold like that, because that doesn't make any sense. What's more likely is some retailer thinking that they could flip the incentive for a higher amount of money went, I'll just buy these comics I can't sell to anybody, which
No,
doesn't actually help anybody here, right?
No,
Like, I mean, I guess you have a slightly higher circulation, but it's not good to have product on the market that, I'm sorry, I'm going into the weeds and I shouldn't be going.
No, I genuinely find this interesting, like, because the, this comic is a business to a degree, and
Sure.
like, we were paying everybody on this book and we were trying to make sure we make enough back. It's hard to say no to money on the table,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we did one incentive cover for issue 1, and that was a Gabriel Hernandez Walter cover, which is beautiful. And I think we did an incentive for issue 2, which was a black and white version of mine. I mean, and I'm one that's happy to experiment, with like cover stock or price point or things like that. It's good to experiment and see what happens. But I would say, like, it's not like we were selling crazy from incentives either. You know what I mean? So it's not a case where we're dying to keep doing that. And for the regular issues, I just, the variant covers aren't they don't really affect sales too much.
Sure.
But they pay for themselves. And for me, it's like, if you want the variant cover, like, if you're sick of my cover and you want to get a Matthias Bergara cover, well, you can get that one. I'm not against choice in that regard. But I mean, we're a small operation effectively, and I wanted to make sure we came out of issue 1, arc 1, having everybody being paid.
Sure.
And potentially like some, us making a profit to cover volume 2.
No, that's what you want to do. If you don't do that, you don't get a volume 2. So
Exactly.
believe me, I 100% understand.
I've talked a lot of worry about this, of the economics of things, and like we said, like trying to plan a story so far when you don't know if the book will exist. It sucks, like, because it's not always a bad reason necessarily, but like you have to kind of be realistic about what you can and what you can't do, or what's smart or what isn't smart, and yeah, it's a minefield, creator on comics.
Yeah. And actually, let me just ask one last question here, only because you used a word. One of the creator-owned comics you, Declan, did was Injection with Warren Ellis, and Warren has been canceled, as it were. Ultimately, affects you as the artist to not be able to get income from a work, but that you had nothing to do with the reasons behind that. Is that something you can speak to in any kind of cogent way?
Yeah,
I'm not trying to throw anybody under a bus. That wasn't the intent of that question.
It's a perfectly reasonable question. Yeah, it affects, like, I've lost a lot of money. Had things gone another way, we'd have 2 more volumes of Injection, and I'd be making a lot more money in royalties based on 1 and 2 and 3, and I did not make those. I mean, not that I didn't make. Actually, to be fair, it's not to say the book isn't still selling, because I'm making some royalties, but I can't do more of those books than I can make any more royalties on that, and that was my entire income outside of the over Marvel covers. And yeah, it does suck. It sucks to slave away in a book for years and try to do your best work, and then have it basically memory hold. Although I will say, I think that might be slightly overblown, because like I said, the book's still selling.
Sure.
It just means I can't do any more, which sucks, because I really liked that book, and as I said, I'm my own person who's, is completely separate of that. So yeah, I mean, yeah, no one's really asked me that, to be honest. So yeah, I'll say that blows.
Okay, sorry, I didn't.
It's completely this is a completely self-interested question. I'm not saying anything about anything else, but I that's something I built with Warren that has kind of, whatever's happening with it can't or won't, because and that does suck when, that was a big swing for me, was to leave Marvel and do creator on book like that. And yeah, it does hurt the other people on the book, like me and Jordy, and or anybody else who's, however, other many collaborators on whatever of the books. It's not really talked about, and it does suck.
Yeah. So let's talk maybe a little bit more about the physical production of the book. And Jordan, you put a question thing, but is that still a valid question? Okay, so we have an audience question that we're gonna put up because it was there. Jordan's gonna bring it up.
Rory and Joe should not be held for any stories that come out about me.
Oh yeah, no, that's.
To get that on record.
It's all good. Rodrigo, is it hard to keep track? I was going to ask this question, so this is very good that Rodrigo asked this. Is it hard to keep track of your characters traveling through time? Do you plan the plot to avoid paradoxes, etc.? Rory, why don't you start with there?
Yeah, so I personally don't find it that hard to keep track of them. I think partly that's down to the way we've built the time travel mechanics, so that whatever has happened. So in a sense, the way we treat it is that when they're going to different time periods, it's almost like they're going to different geographic locations, and in that sense, it just makes that bit easier to kind of keep track of everything. Would be how, and that was like partly to stop us going insane, because obviously with a long running, what we hope will be a long running book, if time can be changed, the propensity for things to kind of go off the wall and just devolve into like, I love time travel stories where things can get changed, but they can also devolve into just incoherent mush after a certain point. And so kind of keeping things streamlined in that way it was good for the longevity of the book, and also kind of helping us to keep focused on characters as well. That would be a big part.
Yeah. So how do you? Guess I would want to re-ask that question, not necessarily in terms of history changing, okay, but in terms of characters changing, right? Because the minute you're in a time travel story, at some point someone's going to have knowledge about something. I mean, there's even dialogue in it. Like, don't tell them that. Wait a minute, they don't want to know that. So that seems like it's a challenging thing to navigate on some level, at least.
Well, I think it's a thing that could become, but I think the fact that the majority of the characters that we follow are aware of the rules, as it were, means that they're unlikely. We may get to a story eventually where someone does, well, actually, we will get to a story where someone does try to, and yeah, I think for now, because obviously people like Tatsuo and everyone in the syndicate, we haven't gone into great detail, but they know that there's a specific reason why you don't try and like cross your own timeline and all those kind of things. So that's the characters themselves kind of put up those guardrails, if that makes sense.
But baked into the plot of the story, the agent doesn't know any of the rules and becomes a point of conflict in several places as a result.
Sure, but I suppose because she's with Tatsuo and gains that knowledge from him, that kind of keeps her off that track. And also it's because for the first arc as well, she's quite restricted because they don't have the means to impact that in any way, really.
Sure. Does that get harder for the future arcs? And the reason I ask, because it just seems like so much of her story is she absolutely wants to go back and change things, like, right? That's kind of her goal and motivation, right? Like,
I don't know, is it necessary that she wants to change things? I think it's purely just reuniting with her family.
Yeah, she's not trying to go back in time and stop her family from being separated. She's trying to find them as they are. So, it feels like the characters are on one timeline. It just happens to go through other times. We have one direct experience where we're following these characters. So yeah, it's not like Naomi's trying to go back and like stop her family from being disconnected. She's just trying to catch them where they are in basically the experience of the story.
Yeah, I just particularly scene with Tatsu and Oscar, you find out what Oscar's fate is, seems to change Tatsuo and change the story. And this is, I guess, what I mean, or Rodrigo was asking too, about paradoxes per se, but keeping track of all of that seems like it can be tricky.
Yeah, doesn't feel like in that sense, that doesn't. To me, that's quite straightforward and linear. Is that he went off on a trip? Like, again, just maybe it's just a thing of when you think about it in terms of time travel, that there's an inherent kind of it's an inherently kind of confusing topic. But I think if you just think about it more as geography, for me at least, that kind of simplifies it.
Okay.
Yeah, that was always the approach from the beginning. Was time as geography. They're going to another place. Just happens to be a year. And I think what I was more worried about is if we were going to show backstories to the characters or flashbacks that might get confusing. But I think we managed to work out a way where we're going through, say, a narrative timeline where we follow these characters. So even when we cut back to, say, Nadia as a kid, we're still following this, because it's going back to an emotional moment. So it's getting to use time travel as a narrative device necessarily rather than a plot device. That kind of rule we have where like nothing, you can't really change anything, one simplifies things in a way, but also restricts things in a good way, because like we're saying, time travel stories can just go off the rails, and they can become about the plot rather than about the characters. And we kind of want to make sure it's the characters first, and the sci-fi of it all is the engine, which adds more drama.
Sure. Joe, when you're trying to keep this stuff straight, because you've only got what the scripts that you've been able to read, right? So I wonder about sequences like where they end up they don't know what year they're at. Did you know where they at that point in the process? Did you?
I don't think so. I think I'd only read that one script, so I didn't know what was going. But that's quite good. That's like, I mean, therefore I'm only really presented with what's in front of me, right? So I'm kind of going along with it how a reader would.
Right.
Because of how the first issue ends, I really didn't need to show very much in that last sequence. So it was a forest, but that's about it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I could be very ambiguous with everything else. I wasn't really married to showing anything else from that time period. So yeah. As far as I remember, I was going into it blind. It was just sort of, I'm pretty sure I hadn't read the second script. Yeah.
We've had Joe scripts as they were done, so I don't even think we sent out lines or anything. Had that experience on Injection where the Warren said to me he wanted me to be the first audience, which was cool because it did mean every single time I got a script, I had to kind of go, okay, time to level up. I felt like, because I still don't know what happens to that book. And if I knew how it ended, that might cut down my enthusiasm for what comes next.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know. I didn't know what happened, so I don't know if it would or not. But I think there's an argument that might be the case. And I did find that getting a brand new script where everything was new and I didn't know what was happening, it made me just kind of like consider this story as opposed to like, here's page 20 to 40 of this ongoing thing.
Right.
Because like, working on a graphic novel, say, can be very like, grinding because you don't know where you are in the story and it feels like it's going on forever. The benefit of drawing episodic stories, I feel, is that it's 20-page increments. And when you get to 20 or 22 pages, bam, that's done. You put that aside and then you get a breather to start the next one. And I think it helps give an artist an opportunity to kind of just reboot as opposed to drawing another set of pages.
But I wonder about, let's call it Chekhov's gun problem, right? Like if you're going to need to have a gun, you have to insert the gun in the story at some point, right? Like it can't just pulled out of nowhere.
Yeah, I've definitely over or under designed things at the end of issues and then regretted it afterwards. but I don't remember like there being literally like, there needs to be a gun here. I'm pretty sure the guys would have said that if that was the case. Yeah,
because we are at least probably well into another script by then. So but like what I would never want to happen, which like has has happened to me, my own fault, is character steps into a room and the last page is like there's a bomb and you draw the page and the next issue is like he throws the bomb out the window. You're like, I didn't draw a window, little things like that. But I don't think we haven't had those problems.
Well, or like at the end of an issue, character enters like a luxurious palace. Like for one page, you could probably get away with just showing a window of that palace, right? But if you've got to draw like a ridiculously elaborate background in the next issue, that must not be fun at all. So, it would be good to know if there's a palace coming.
So let me ask you another question, Joe, about kind of pacing and size and shape. So the previous book was this one, which is an original graphic novel. That's very different than doing a 22-page story, right? Like work-wise, flow-wise, the pacing.
Yeah, I mean, me and Rory were approaching Writing Blood as 4 issues, so it was kind of set out that way. We did do one issue. Okay. Yeah, we did do essentially one chapter at a time. So they were 28 pages, I think. So it was a little bit longer than Time Before Time, but it was essentially the same thing. Yeah, the only difference was I think it was maybe more time in between issues. I think he had a little bit of Writing Blood issue, whereas this is just rolling, right? So there's no let up.
And what was the thinking for the decision to make it an original graphic novel rather than to serialize it?
I think that was
Necessity.
necessity. Yeah, I think it was because partly after we submitted it to Image, it was around the time of the beginning of COVID and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And we weren't really sure, like, were comics coming back? We also figured that at that point, probably not like top of the agenda for Eric Stevenson. So we figured we'd just try and get it out in whatever shape we could. So we released it digitally as individual issues. And so I don't know, possibly as a result of that, Image were more inclined to release it as an original graphic novel rather than single issues.
So
No, it was actually a case where I don't remember Rory put it out digitally because, well, it had pitched Image and just hadn't heard back. I'd sent it to Eric and Eric hadn't replied yet, and I was like, have you read it yet? And he just hadn't had a chance. And I felt bad because, Rory had paid everybody to do this book and nobody had read it. And because that was it. I think we pitched the first pages and then I'd suggested just make the book, regardless if it gets picked up or not, just make your book. And they did, in fairness to them. But then, COVID hit and they submit the issues out digitally. But then when COVID hit and we didn't know what was happening, I pitched Time for Time to Image and I reminded them about Write It in Blood. And I can't remember if it was myself or Eric suggested if we released that as a graphic novel around the same time that Time for Time, that might help. So that I think because Write It in Blood came out beginning of March, February, and then when they were pushing that, then we were able to announce Time for Time. So if you bought issue 1 of Time for Time, you can go and buy, by pretty much the same creative team, you can pick up a graphic novel. So that was because to be fair, Rory and Joe weren't known, and like I helped out on the book, but I didn't write or draw it or anything.
Sure.
So I think it was a good way. Sorry, the cover. Yeah, I assembled the book and I
design. To be fair.
Yeah, I wanted to help the guys get the book done, but I didn't write it. Like that's not, I don't. It's those guys' book, but I figured it was a good way.
Your name's not on it anywhere here on the cover, so
yeah. It's on the credits, But like I said, I didn't want to, it's their book. I wanted to help platform those guys and get a book made, and that was great. But I think it was a nice way to push that book with a new Image book with me attached to it. Right. So I think that's where that came from. Basically, was there wasn't much point putting out 4 issues in that form, but I guess it was less risk for Image to put it out as a graphic novel off the back of a new book that I was doing. I think is probably the thinking there.
And Rory, did that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, well, I suppose it's one of those things can't know until it's, because there's no way of looking into that alternate timeline where it didn't come out as English. But no, it's done well. We're happy with how it's going.
Yeah, and so let me ask you maybe a older, broader question, because when I always try to research people before I do an interview, one of the things that it did, and I hadn't really realized it, is you had written a bunch of Zuda comics.
Jesus, wow, you went.
Well, no. I mean, I don't necessarily need to talk about the Zuda comics necessarily, but that was an experiment to do digital books by a giant corporation, a really early one.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I'm curious as to like what you might be able to say for the historical record for that experience versus doing digital comics now.
Yeah, like, God, that is so long ago. It was so, like, to give context, I was still in, like, I suppose the equivalent of secondary school, which was the equivalent of high school at the time.
Wow.
So you were 16?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So Zuda was this initiative that DC did, I think, back in like 2007 to like 2009, I think, maybe.
Yeah, that's what my notes say. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was kind of, people would send in, I think, about 8 pages of a proposed series, and every month the Zuda team would put about 10 of them up for like kind of a public vote, and whoever one would get a full series commissioned. And it was very much, it was. I entered a couple of times, and it was. It was an interesting experience, but it was, I think, probably one of the first forays into digital. Like, obviously, there were like, I think probably came just a couple of years too early, to be honest, because had it shown up maybe even 3 or 4 years later, it might have had a bit more long-term success. But now, I mean, there's so many avenues out there for people to put out digital comics. Like, it's totally different.
It's interesting for a corporation like that to actually be ahead of the curve for once.
Sure. I think one of the problems from my point of view is it didn't seem like it had a particular editorial voice. It seemed like they were doing something just because they thought that they should do it, not because they knew how to do it or what to do with it. But, you know, a lot of digital comics sort of from 2000 to like 2015 are like that. They're just, we don't know what we're doing. Let's throw shit at the wall. Maybe let's have motion in the comics, you know, like.
I'll say this, actually, I was friends with the editors of Zuda Comics at the time. When I was in New York, I got to meet a lot of the editors there. And I mean, they were in their own kind of other world. And, you know, there's only, since I got, and I could be wrong, so, you know, don't hold me to this, but they were trying to do certain things and the people higher ups were trying to do something else. And I think as it happens with kind of corporate comics is somewhere in between would have been a better thing. You know, or you've got two competing kind of, you know, objectives with this stuff and they don't necessarily meet in the middle. But I do, I mean, I think that it was an amazing experiment for them to do. And to be fair to DC, they're known for doing that. But yeah, I think maybe it was a couple of years ahead of its time because now it just seems to be the norm to put something out digitally and then put out a nice trade collection of it, which is what the standard seems to be now.
Yeah.
Well, speaking as the guy who owns the bookstore, ultimately it's the book that matters the most to me.
Yeah.
But
I'm the guy who did the digital X-Men thing with Hickman, and like I just want it in print. Like it was a good experiment, but like, you know, if I want it won't feel real until I actually when I can pick up the pages and look through it. That's when I'll know I actually did that comic.
And you at this point, when you doing the layouts, were you considering the difference between this and then what it's going to be when it's laid out that way? Like, did that constrain your storytelling choices, I suppose?
It definitely did, but it was interesting, you know. And I worked out that book so that it can work in page format, and then made it work. Like the storytelling was designed so that you can read on the page, and then I could make it work for that linear format. So I know some people have complained about it, but like there's moments that are very specifically vertical in that story. That was a choice by us that who did it because it was very constraining, and that's why I'm doing a second one now. But I probably won't do any more after that because the constraints are interesting, but they are ultimately constraints. And I like to go wide. I like to do double page spreads. I like to do. I tend to do very horizontal panels.
Sure,
can't do that. So it's an interesting experiment, and it's nice to be paid to do it as well. But you know, you're not going to see me do it on my creator own work just because it's not how I like to make stuff.
I understand. So what's the future Time Before Time? How many more arcs do you guys have?
Well, we're working on. Well, Joe is drawing volume 2 at the moment, and we're in the early stages of writing volume 3.
Okay.
Which, I think in an ideal world we kind of hit about 6 in total.
That's what we'd like to do. Whether we can, I mean,
one of which would kind of be the one-offs between volumes, like Dex one and the next one we're doing.
Yeah, that's the thing is, because you know I don't like making promises I can't keep. So like we've been telling people that the one shot I did last month, like there's no plans to collect it, and which is true because you know we can't do a trade paperback of one.
Yeah.
But if the series gets to go longer and we do more, then we can justifiably collect it down the line. So that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to kind of, you know, have those kind of one shots to do something, to do stories outside of the main narrative of the characters and build the world a little bit more. And get to a place where we feel like after arc 1, both myself and Joe are thinking myself and Rory, we're thinking there's more to this. Like there's places where this can go. It would suck if we had to wrap it up at 5. And it kind of feels cool right now because it feels like we're capitalizing on what's been built and where it can go after this. So but it's down to sales at the end of the day, like, you know, so the better volume 1 sells, the more likely we can, you know, hit that trajectory and stick the landing.
We picked it as the club book, so you got that many sales at least on
single-handedly.
Guaranteed.
Yeah, like we're not going to lie, that was a huge help.
No, I mean it all helps. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know I want to read volume 6, so at the end of the day, that's you know.
Well, that's the next one. We're going to mess things up. We're volume 6.
Even better. Well, it's time travel story.
I would love if we could do that, but I know that like retailers such as yourself would hang me from the rafters.
Didn't you Yeah, because you wanted to do with the issue 6, didn't you want it to be 1994?
I wanted to be issue 1994. Yeah. Yeah, I asked Eric Stevenson. He was like, maybe as a cover. I was like, okay, because I thought it would be cool, but like at the same.
Yeah, no, but as a physical object of commerce, it can screw some things up to do that.
That's it, you know.
Yeah.
So
that's the only problem, you know.
Yeah,
and unfortunately, the physical objects of commerce. So
yes, yeah.
But also, fortunately, because then you guys can make them and then get paid and then live by making these things that we sell in the stores. It's the circle of life.
That's the ideal. It is amazing to just be able to kind of put out stories and be, you know, make. When I did Injection, it was so empowering to know that it didn't have to be Deadpool, it didn't have to be Moon Knight. You could just have an idea, and the book succeeds on the merit of the book, you know, or maybe a famous writer would help. But like the money you make is literally the money you made from an original thing. It's not piggybacking off of some other IP. And I don't know if your experience, because I mean, it's different. Time Red and Blood is different time for time. But I hope this has been that experience for you guys, the way that like I had that previously.
I mean, it's been great. Yeah, I don't know how you feel, Rory, but I mean, I couldn't be more pleased with the reception, the financial return. Everything's been great.
It's the way it's supposed to be. I love it. It almost seems to me like this couldn't happen anywhere but Image.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying that since the start. It's just like, well, firstly, I wouldn't particularly. I don't think this would fit anywhere else. And yeah, I love Image. I mean, American publishers, that's like it's my favorite. If there were to be a favorite, that would be it. Yeah, just like the opportunity for creators is unbelievable there. And not, yeah, I mean, I've said this before, but it's like, you know, is the best deal like financially. You gamble on yourself at Image, you know what I mean? And that's very, it is a big risk, but like the rewards are massive as well. So it's up to you to take that plunge. I know that's like a scary plunge, and obviously if you've got a mortgage and kids and stuff, you're going to be far less inclined to do that. But it's so worth it. Even if you took a year out of your schedule to do something for Image, it's so worthwhile giving it a shot, because the only way you're going to know whether that's going to work is just by doing it, right? And you get 100% of the reward from it. It's great. It is.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah, no one's trying to take your rights. No one's trying, you know, it's like it's a minefield out there. Like, and just some companies like such shits and talk a big game, and you know that they're just screaming creators at the other end of it. Like, can't say anything because you have friends who work at those companies, you know.
Sure.
But like Image, if you're getting screwed over at Image, it's your collaborator screwing you over, you know. It's not the company. So remember that, guys. It's me screwing you over. But that's the thing. It's just the to go from idea to making something to putting it out there to, and you know, you see how much shipping costs. You see how much this variant cover costs. Like, and it's an opportunity to learn, you know, and kind of empower yourself through, you know, information. Like, I have no huge complaints about Marvel or anything, but like they'll hand you your royalties and you've no idea. I mean, you don't know what that's from. You know, they just give you the money. You're like, thanks. Whereas the Image, like, you know how much money you're making Comixology or Google Play, or, you know, even
I think that level of transparency enables
amazing.
you to run it like a business, right? Like, I'm not a particularly business kind of guy, but like I like that ability to control the thing, right? And I think
that information is very powerful for artists.
Yeah, totally.
You know what you're worth and where the time you're investing is going, and the return you're getting from it. I think it's important. You know, I mean, it's tough. You know, I went to art college, and they don't teach you how to be a business. You know, I think that they should, because you effectively are a small business. You're running your own. You know, your skill set is in demand, and you need to be able to account for it. And I was useless to that stuff. I'm still not great, but I'm better than what I was. But if you really want to be doing your own work, then that's stuff you kind of need to know, because other people will take advantage.
Yeah, no, I'll even go a step further, Declan, that I really feel like there's all of these programs, and they're all really good programs in America, turning out 10 students doing comics a year. They're great programs, but they don't teach those guys very much about business at all. And And you've got a lot of kids out there, signing contracts to do 128-page graphic novels, and they're getting paid, like
$50 a page or something.
right, exactly, yeah, not enough to make a living, because they're not even, they don't even have the ability to figure out what does that mean in terms of like an hourly wage,
Yeah, like you've gone to college and you paid all this money. I mean, it's different here in the UK. It's not as bad as say colleges are in America, how much they cost, but like for all that money you're spending and you're coming out with no knowledge of how to kind of protect yourself or know what to ask for. And I feel there's a whole generation of like really interesting artists that should be in comics now, but they took bad contracts 3 years ago, burnt out, thinking this is what comics is, and then now they're all in animation or something, like that's it's getting worked up now. It drives me crazy. And like, I'm hoping, by doing the books with these guys too, I'm hoping now like Rory has a better idea of what to expect on his next book, and Joe has an idea of what to expect, rather than what other publishers would do is just completely keep you in the dark, because it's in their interest. Because the less you know, then the more they can take advantage. Like, not always in a nefarious way, but like if you don't know what you can or can't make or achieve or deserve, then you don't have any leverage in any kind of contract stuff. And it drives me crazy, especially when there's just like so many publishers out there who take advantage.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So let's go. Let's start wrapping this up.
Something more
Joe,
positive.
This is a full-time job for you, yeah?
Yes.
So this is, you're doing time before time for the next X amount of time.
Yes.
Very good. Love it. Rory, do you have anything else that's coming up that you want to plug?
Well, I've also, in addition to Time Before Time, I've got some Judge Dredd stuff coming out in the new year from 2000 AD, and I've also started writing Spawn, also for Image Comics.
Very nice. Regular basic Spawn or one of the spinoffs?
No, regular Spawn, original.
Regular Spawn.
Oh, I like basic Spawn.
Yeah, basic Spawn.
Standard issue Spawn.
So basic,
Basic.
That's going to be an interesting kind of challenge.
Slightly different from Time Before Time, no?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's definitely stretching different muscles, but it's great so far.
Todd works a little differently.
I mean, he's got his methods, but
yeah. Well, they work for him, so. What issue do you start on?
324, which is actually out this week, I believe.
Very good. Well, then, people who are watching this, go and buy a copy of Spawn. Why not? Declan, do you have anything else you want to plug?
Not Spawn. Screw that. No. I'm delighted for, like, if I'm being honest, part of why I wanted to do Time for Time was so that more people would find Rory's writing, and I'm delighted that he's gotten a gig like this. It's amazing.
Absolutely.
I'm over the moon for him. I never say it to his face, like.
Of course.
I can do it over video, but like I could never do it in person. But no, I am myself. What am I doing? Well, I'm currently working on a second arc of the X-Men Unlimited book. Hickman isn't writing it, I'm writing it. So I'm writing and drawing. That's next. It'll be like 4 chapters. So I'm in the middle of that at the moment. A rake of covers, as usual. Trying to think anything of note. Just that black, what's it, Radiant Black, issue 10, I did variant for that. I think that's out now. But otherwise, it's Time Before Time. I'm working on some stuff for next year. I'm going to write and draw an Image book for next year. So I'm kind of working on that while I'm wrapping up the X-Men stuff. So yeah, that's my next kind of big thing. But I think, I'm not sure when the X-Men thing will be out. The weird thing about that is once it's finished, they can just put it out, which is weird. But yeah, that's me. That's what I got.
Nice. Okay, so then the last question always is, there's a lot of people, this is a big series of videos that we've done here. I think we're somewhere like 225 of these, something absurd like that. So we have a lot of people who are watching it who are interested in making comics, doing comics. They don't necessarily know where to start. They don't know what to do. So I would love to hear from you. And I really hope that this fire truck outside is not about to burn down something next door. Whatever. We'll worry about that later. What do you guys have as your recommendation for someone who wants to break into comics, make comics? It can be spiritual, it can be practical, it can be a craft thing, it can be an emotional thing. What would you say to someone who wants to make comics? Joe, why don't we start with you?
Well, firstly, I would want to make sure that they really have a deep love for comics, because otherwise it's got the potential to break you. That could sound sort of depressing, but like it's definitely a good place to start. But assuming you are that person with a lot of love for comics, you just, if you're more inclined to draw, and you're not so clear on the writing thing, find a person who writes. And the reverse is true if you're more inclined to write. But yeah, I mean, the best advice is just to make something, right? That's what I would say to everyone, is just don't wait for any kind of permission from anyone. Just go for it, because the first things you make probably they might not amount to much other than you learning something from it, and that's okay. You know, the first thing you do shouldn't necessarily be some massive epic. You know, it can be a one-page story. It can be, you know, comics are a beautiful thing because you really don't need any money to get it started. You don't need a lot of tools or necessarily knowledge. You can just jump in, right? Like Alan Moore says, all you need is a biro, right? All you need is a pen.
Yep.
And it's so true.
Completely agreed. Completely agreed. Rory, what do you say? Who wants to write comics? What do I do, man?
I would say specifically to people like me who are writers who can't draw, find someone and pay them, first of all, and start very small, I would say. Like, for instance, there was a period several years ago where I, like, every month I would write, say, a story between 4 and 8 pages, and maybe up to 10, and get someone to draw it each month, different people each month drawing them, and then just putting them up online, and occasionally kind of collecting them and, you know, showing them to editors and other people, other potential collaborators. And I think, similar to what Joe was saying, just start on something small and make sure it gets finished would be the big thing.
Roy, didn't you give me something once? I remember you gave me a small comic. I think Phil Barrett had drawn one story, and there was some other ones in there.
Yeah. Those were the kind of the essentially portfolio comics I used to hand out.
Yeah, I remember though. That's what kind of, because I'd heard of the Zuda thing, but I hadn't read it. And I don't know if you handed it to me or you sent it to me. I can't remember, but I remember, yeah, you had these short stories that were well drawn, and it was very easy to just kind of quickly read them and go like, oh, these are cool shorts. That's the first way I even really learned that you like what your writing was like. And it seems simple, but like, you know, in this course of 2 minutes, straight away, I could just see that you were able to write, which is huge.
Very good. Declan, bring it home for us. We've had the artists say the artist's point of view, the writers say the writer's point of view. You're the writer artist.
Yeah.
Split the middle.
Okay, well, let's see. We got 20 minutes, right?
Yeah.
I would say there's some very practical advice, and then there's kind of overall advice. So I would say practical, I would kind of back up Rory and Joe were saying there was just do something and finish it. I was back home at my mum's house there last weekend, and I found these old superhero comics I had drawn, and they weren't good. But I got to page 9. I'm like, geez, I drew a lot of this. And then page 10, and you could see I just gave up drawing it. Because, you know, especially when you're younger, you have these kind of aspirations of doing huge opus, amazing bodies of work, but you don't know of how hard it actually is to do it. So do something like limited and finish it, you know, and you will be a much better artist with 3 of those under your belt. 3 10-page stories, you'll be a better artist or writer than you will be if you did a 30-page one-shot, 60-page book or whatever, because you'll have learned how to wrap up more stories than you will than just kind of, you know, trailing along forever.
Yes.
So I think that's important, and it's important to be able to evaluate yourself as a storyteller, and 3 half stories are no help. That's kind of a practical thing. I think another thing is find your tribe. Comics can be pretty lonely and isolating, and as what Joe was saying, you need to love it to do it, because it's too many things that can stop you. And find some people, I don't mean like-minded, but like people who will be a good source of resistance to what you're trying to do, people who will push you as a storyteller, people who will give you good, solid advice, people who aren't just going to pat you on the back and go like, oh, that's brilliant. People who are in the field, who will push you to do your best work. That's ideally what you want. And I would say that, you know, I think maybe keep in mind the kind of creator that you want to be. You know, a lot of people are perfectly happy to draw Spider-Man their entire lives, and that's already nearly impossible. And it can be very easy to get lost in the weeds You know, try work on things that you actually want to do. You know, it doesn't always happen. Sometimes you're going to draw something, you're like, this sucks, but like it's a job. But you know, try keep in mind the kind of creator you want to be and the kind of books that you want to be making. I'm really satisfied. The books I've been making are kind of crime or sci-fi stuff, and it's kind of nice looking at the books I've done and go like, yeah, I like those books, you know. Or Moon Knight at Marvel worked out really well for me. I loved working on that, and you don't always get to work on the things that you enjoy because sometimes, you know, you're doing it for money or for whatever reasons, or you think this is going to be a big hit or whatnot. So it's something I'm finding now, a few years, you know, like a decade in my career, is kind of like, I think COVID helped a little bit, where you take a step back and realize like, what's the kind of work I want to be doing. It's a different question to when you're breaking in, but I think it's kind of something that's I'm thinking about a bit more. So yeah, so I hope that was a good answer.
No, that was a perfect answer. I love that. That was absolutely perfect. Well, I really want to thank you guys for your time today. I think this has been great. I've had a blast talking about comics and making comics.
Thanks for having us on, man.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Well, hope you sell all those books and you need to order some more.
Yeah, no, don't worry. We're all good. We're all good. So put me on one, will you, Jordan? Thank you. So yeah, so this month is Time Before Time, which I say this before, but accidentally kept saying Time After Time, like for the first 3 weeks that we picked this book. Staff laughed at me all the time because, like, get the name of the book. Of course, the Time After Time is set here in San Francisco and is also a time traveling crime story. So you can understand. I'm old and senile. Anyway, well, that was a ringing endorsement, wasn't it? Anyway, so if you want well, you're sitting at home, you're like, I don't know what to read. This is a really good piece of crime fiction, piece of science fiction. It's about human relationships. It's really, really good. This is a great comic. You should read this, and I would recommend that you do it. And if you buy it from our web store, which you can certainly do, you'll get a free signed book plate that is exclusive to us. So, neener. And also go buy Write in Blood as well. Write It in Blood, because this is books that they did. Next month's book for the graphic novel, the adult club, is Far Sector, and we're going to have N.K. Jemisin here along with Jamal Campbell to talk about this. It's pretty rare that I pick two kind of science fiction books in a row, but you know, this one's a crime book and that one's it's actually kind of also a crime book in a way. Anyway, it's more superhero book, but so that's next month. And then for the Classics Club, we're doing Enigma this month by Pete Milligan and Duncan Fegredo. I think it's Fegredo. I think it's how you pronounce it. So look for that interview next month. And then the Kids Club for the month is Manu by Kelly Fernandez. So we've got 3 great interviews coming up next month with 3 more great books. You should join the club because that's how this works. I want to thank Jordan, my producer, for being my producer. I want to thank my staff, KATT and Zoe and Katie, for being my staff and being awesome. And I want to thank these guys for making comics, because if you guys didn't make comics, I wouldn't be able to sit in a store full of them, selling them to other people, talking to people about. So you guys are the most important people on this one.
Thanks, man. Well, we wouldn't be able to, if you weren't selling them, we wouldn't be able to make a living. So
Absolutely, yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And thanks to your staff for giggling at my jokes in the background. That gave me a lot of confidence.
It's an ego boost.
It's what I'm here for.
Love it. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And we will see you next month.